Then let's go ahead and get started. Let's call the meeting to order at 7:18. We've got a full agenda tonight.
Yes. Right.
Thank you. That was so weird. My screen just went blank. Did anybody else's?
Yeah, I think for everyone.
No, mine's
Okay, we got people logging back in. Okay, let's give it a minute then, Erica.
It kicked me out but brought me right back in. It's weird.
Oh, it's really strange. I wonder if is Zoom part of that AWS?
I was gonna say who got impacted on Monday with all that AWS stuff.
Yes, I did.
Yep.
I wonder if Zoom is part of that. Crazy, crazy.
Well, thankfully,
You let us know, Erica, when we're ready to go again.
yeah, thankfully the interpreters are all on their channel, so that's still set up as well.
Hello?
Hi, Pretty. Can you see us
Can
now?
you hear me?
Yes. Can you hear us?
Yes.
Can you see us?
Yes.
Yay!
Okay.
Trish, you're ready to go if you want, since we're kind of late. I can bypass doing roll call.
Okay.
I have track of everyone and mostly everybody's here. You have a quorum.
Okay. Well, then let's go ahead and let's get started and review the agenda this evening. Are there any changes, any comments, any amendments? Okay, we got people coming back on, seeing and hearing none. We'll go ahead and move on to, do I need to approve it, Erica? I'm like totally drawn to blank. No?
No,
okay.
we only approve them if there's any changes.
Okay. Okay, then let's go ahead and move on to public comment.
For public comment, we have
And-
Mr. Carl Argila. Go ahead, Mr. Carl.
Hi, Erica. As always, I'd like to know that my audio is audible.
Yes, sir.
That's great. Thank you. Good evening again, board. As you know, my name is Carl Argila. I am the father of Cavan Argila, an intellectually disabled deaf client at the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center. And as usual, tonight's board meeting, including my comments, are being recorded under the provisions of the Bagley-Keene Act and will be posted for public review on my blog at www.sgprc.net. We have the last recording, full recording of the last board meeting up, and we hope to get tonight's board meeting up within a day or two. As you know, board, I filed a Welfare and Institutions Code 4731 complaint against your agency and your vendor for their failure to provide a communication accessible environment at your so-called deaf house. My son, Cavan Argila, is an involuntary resident at that facility. This complaint has been reviewed by the director of DDS. His response is that DDS will investigate my complaint, but will not inform me of the outcome because of client confidentiality, since DDS is my son's conservator. Board, are you seeing the inherent conflict of interest in this situation? My complaint regarding the lack of communication accessibility at your deaf house could be resolved quickly and without any drama. Instead, you have prompted me to file a complaint with the National Association of the Deaf, an organization which has a history of aggressively addressing communication accessibility complaints like this. Also, board, I need to inform you of something new. I recently learned that your agency has created a $10,000 liability for my son with the Social Security Administration. Expect to hear more from me about this. Finally, board, please remember that Dr. Weller has appointed Patricia Rambo as his designee for my son's conservatorship. We do not trust Ms. Rambo. to be an unbiased representative in her role as the executive director's designee for my son. And we are requesting again that Dr. Weller appoint another person to serve in this very important position. Once again, board, I am requesting that you terminate your conservatorship of my son, Cavan Argila. As you know, my son has clearly stated that he does not want to be conserved by you. And my son has clearly stated that he wants his family to be his conservator. And just a reminder again for any parent hearing my voice tonight, please take note, no matter how consumer friendly the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center may appear to be, ultimately they have the power to become your child's conservator and ruin your life. Please assure that the official minutes of your board meeting accurately state that I am requesting that the San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center terminate their conservatorship of my son, Cavan Argila. Good night, board.
Thank you. Erica, is there any additional public comment?
No, ma'am.
Okay, we're going to go ahead and move on to the next item. We do have a board training this evening, and it is linguistics and cultural competencies. And I'm looking for the individual that will be hosting it, presenting it on my screen here. Jesse, help.
Evening. I think we have her here. I see you. Hi, Lena. Nice to see you.
I'm looking. I'm looking for you. I'm looking for you. I know I'll find you eventually. There you are. Okay. Thank you. I'm sorry. Thank you. You were way down in my corner. So thank you very much. So I'm going to turn it over to you. And if you want to share a little bit about yourself and then get started, we really appreciate that.
Excellent. Thank you so much. Good evening, everybody. Thank you so much for having me back. As I've said before, and then I tell you not to say it out loud, this is my favorite regional center. I should just go on record now and say it. It's so wonderful to see you all again. Thank you for inviting me back. And let's see here. All right. Are you able to see my screen okay?
Yes.
Yes. Thank you.
All right, so we only have about an hour, and I'm going to attempt to do the impossible and get us through a 6-hour training in 1 hour and make it meaningful. So this is Deepening Impact Through Cultural Humility. And my name is Lena Morana Cereto. I have been working with San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center for a couple of years now. We were a big part of the language and culture plan a few years ago, where we did quite a few focus groups and then presented to your organization in terms of the findings and then recommendations as, you know, pertaining to what we heard from the community and clients. So, you know, one of the things, I know this is an annual training for you. And I want to start by acknowledging something that, you know, maybe a lot of people have been feeling, and that is, can we say DEI? Can we say diversity, equity, inclusion? And, you know, it has become complex, and I think more difficult in the current climate. There are conflicting views. There's, you know, changing expectations. There's a lot of uncertainty about what's the right thing to say or what's the right thing to do. And I know that there are also organizations that are looking at reduced funding or priorities that are shifting. So it can be hard to know how to move forward. But through all of this, it was such a joy to get an email from San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center, because to me that signifies that you remain deeply committed to really supporting your consumers, your clients, and their diverse needs. And, you know, as I've read through your mission statement, as I've, you know, talked to the folks in your communities, to your staff, I really have this feeling that you believe every person deserves to feel respected and understood and valued. So on your end, that really means continuing to grow and adapt in how you serve. That doesn't mean you're doing anything wrong, right? This is what we're going to talk about, is how do we always continue to engage in learning? And so today I want to add one more tool to your toolkit or your tool belt, and we're going to talk about cultural humility. And so if you're not quite sure what that means yet, that's the goal for the hour. But I promise you that today is really about reflecting on ourselves. We're going to talk about culture tonight. We're going to talk about our assumptions and our perspectives. And what I hope that you take away from tonight is that you recognize that every interaction that you have, whether it's as a board member, as a staff member, as a service recipient or family member, every interaction that you have is a learning opportunity. So we're going to talk about examining our own cultural identities so that we can understand other folks' experience. Now, some may be alike, some may be different, but tonight is really about how do we think more strategically about the way that you approach your work, and depending on your role. You know, being a board member myself of several organizations, I love the term ambassador because that's really what folks are, right? You're an ambassador for the regional center. People are going to ask you, well, what do you do? And what does the regional center do? And you might have an elevator speech prepared that you're ready to go. But today we're going to talk about how do our words and our actions and our attitudes really help shape trust and outcomes. And if we learn what cultural humility is and we practice it, then it can really help to strengthen your relationships and then make your services even more inclusive and effective. So, as we get started today, I just want to invite you to approach our session with openness and curiosity, self-reflection as well. Trust me that tonight is not about having all the answers. That's the great part. There's no quiz or anything like that. But again, it's really about expanding our own awareness, building skills that will help us meet people where they are. You ready? All right, so I gave you the purpose of the workshop. I'm gonna put one more tool in your tool belt. Again, the goal is really how do you continue to be even more effective than you already are in building relationships and serving clients from diverse ranges of language and cultural backgrounds. And you've been doing this work for a while, right? You've been looking at the data. You know that your catchment area is diverse. That's not changing anytime soon, maybe more diverse. So I want to pause because I've said the word cultural humility quite a bit, and we might not all be on the same page when it comes to that. So let's break it down real quick, and I'm going to throw this question out, and I'd love for you to type in the chat if you'd like. You can also come off mute if that's more comfortable. And what I'd like for you to share with me is what comes to mind when you think about the word culture. As you're seeing the word culture projected here, what comes to mind for you? And again, let's get the chat going. And if you prefer to come off mute, let's hear you. What comes to mind for you when you think about the word culture? Thanks so much for getting us started. Yes, food, traditions, beliefs, lived experiences, customs and values, shared belief system, traditions, race. Yeah, keep it coming. Absolutely. All of those things. Now, when we meet other people, we often try to find what is similar. What can I latch onto that, oh, maybe we look the same, or, maybe they have the same bumper sticker and it says Go Dodgers right now, right? But that's not all that we have in common with folks. And sometimes it can be trickier to get beneath the surface, if you will. So I'm going to send you a lot of information. I'll send it over to Jesse and Eric, and if you can help me send it out to the board. But I want to leave you today with some activities that you can also do. And I would highly suggest that you do this next one as a board, because you may know each other, but there are different ways to get to know each other. So if I had a lot of time to introduce myself to you tonight, I would share this. And this is called my yo soy, or I am from. And rather than tell you, well, I'm in my 40s and I have a son and I'm a wife and I have 2 dogs, that's kind of surface stuff. I want you to really know about my culture. And so the way that we develop this activity is a few ways. You can either go back to your senses and think about, what you can see, what you can smell, what you can taste, what you can hear, what you can touch. And you can also adapt it. And this particular adaptation has to do with, what do you remember from growing up? So where am I from? Well, if you take a look at the top right corner, I am from the sopes that my grandmother taught me how to make. And they're from my culture, not only because it's a delicious food that I grew up eating, but it was very much tied to family. My grandma would visit us here in the United States once a year. She would teach us how to make these recipes. And so as you're growing up, you're kind of getting one more responsibility, right? Maybe at first it was just playing with the masa, the dough, and then the next year it was putting the tortillera thing happening here. And I remember it very clearly, the year where it was finally my turn to learn how to make the tortilla. And it's a skill, right? You can't just flap it around. You have to do it. Otherwise, grandma yells at you. Now, the next year, it was about laying down that tortilla on the comal, on the stove. And my eyes were always closed because I was scared. And she would just say, Lena, you have to open your eyes and you have to just go for it, which life lessons, right? But this also ties into culture, because once I was old enough to do the whole process, I remember clearly the day that I laid down the tortilla. I was about to walk away and she says, no, you need to watch it. And guess what happened to my tortilla? I don't know if you've ever made homemade tortillas, but it started to rise. And you know what my grandma said to me? I was 8 years old and she says, Lena, you can get married now. And I was 8. So many things like that are related to those sopes. Other things that you see here, for example, when I was very young and I hadn't had knee surgery yet, so I could move. I used to do a lot of Aztec dancing. You ever want to work out? That's the way to go. And it was something that, I learned a lot about what it meant to wear the feathers and the dresses. Up on the top left is a Christmas play, which is celebrated throughout Mexico, called the Pastorela. And I remember being 7 and I was a little angel, all the way until I think I was 13 and I got to be one of the shepherds. But that was a family tradition. Down at the bottom, you might recognize the game Loteria. That's something that we played all the time. And then on the right side there, Spanish. Spanish was a language that I grew up with in my house. People spoke it. People, would variations of Spanish, because it has a lot of different dialects. There's academic Spanish, and there was call my grandma and speak to her in Spanish. So this activity is called Yo Soy De, and I will send you the instructions. Again, I highly suggest that you do this as a board and see what you have in common, and see, where are differences. I love learning about differences when somebody's from a completely different part of the world from me. Even, if we were born in the next town over, you come to find a lot of similarities and differences. But now you know me just a little bit deeper than you did when I just said, I work for the CEO. And so we've talked about culture in the past, if you've come to one of our workshops. And what we know is that all of us, every single one of us, is a cultural being. We all have, as you said, traditions and race and lived experiences and foods that, as I was talking, maybe you were thinking about the food that you would eat with your grandparents or with your family. And all of this, there's different identities. And culture really encompasses or takes a look at the way that we lived. It can be based in historical aspects, economic, religion, political. One of the beautiful things about culture is that it's fluid, it's dynamic, it's always changing. My parents, who were born in Mexico City, as was I, we still celebrate traditions, but I guarantee you they look very different after 30 plus years in the United States. And that's great, because that's what we've developed as we have moved. And one thing to note is that culture exists at different levels. So I have a culture, but then I have a culture as part of a group. So if I'm part of the board, we have a board culture, yeah? And then we are part of an organization. In this case, you are part of San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center. So there's that culture as well. And then we look at society level. So there are many, many different aspects that we can look at. And cultural groups, there's some that might be obvious. Education, for example, geographic location, job classification, military experience. And then there's a lot of things that might not be as easy for us to describe. So I could ask you, for example, well, what's your marital status? And you could probably answer that pretty quickly. But if I said, tell me about your thinking style, that might be a little bit of a head scratcher. We would have to do some work. What I want to connect in terms of the work that you do, I was reading through your website again in preparation, and I found this piece, and I absolutely love it because it talks about you have a mission to deliver essential services and support to individuals with intellectual and developmental disabilities. That's straight from your website. What I want you to remember, though, and I'm sure you know this already, like I said, this is not about telling you that you're doing anything wrong. It's about supporting the great work you already do. But ability and disability, that's only one aspect of a person's identity. That's one aspect. If we look at ourselves like a puzzle, and it would be fantastic in this world if we could pull out one piece of ourselves and work on that and perfect it, and then put it right back into all these other perfect pieces. But it doesn't work that way, right? Because when I walk into a room, I'm not just a person who has diabetes, for example. I'm also a woman. I'm also a Latina woman. I'm also somebody who is bilingual, right? There's so many different pieces of us that it would be really hard to just focus in on that one. So if you feel inclined to, just share with us in the chat, where do you come from? De dónde eres tú? Kind of like I did for you. And you can share, for example, music. You can share a song that your family sang, or you can share a food that your family ate, something that you remember, a game perhaps, or a language that you recall either signing or speaking when you grew up. So I'll invite you to do that as I step into this next piece, but let's get to know each other on a little bit deeper level. And this time we're going to do it through the Yo Soy De. So as a reminder, what we're looking at here, you do a tradition, a food, a language, a game, a dance, anything that you recall from how you grew up, your childhood. I'll be on the lookout for those. So as you've noticed, a lot of the pieces that I've shared with you so far, if we look at this image of this culture tree, we're really talking right now about surface. Those might come a little easier to us. It's the things like, the cooking or the holidays or the language. Now, we have different parts of ourselves. If we start to look beyond that surface, we really can start to look at what are shallow culture. So those unspoken rules. Maybe how do we raise our children? What about our concepts of honesty or our nonverbal communication with each other? Concepts of time. Yes, I love watching baseball. Absolutely. I have great memories of that as well. Going to the lake every summer to ride on my godfather's boat. Thank you for sharing. And then there's even deeper culture than that. And now we're talking about, how do you make decisions? What's your preference? Are you more competitive or cooperative? And those things are not as easy to think about because they are so deep within our culture that we'd have to pause and say, wait a minute, why do I feel more competitive than cooperative? And I'd have to kind of do a deep dive into, does it have something to do with the way I was raised? Oh, I love this, making naca tamales. I hope I pronounced it right. Nicaraguan tamales with mom. Oh, now we'll have to talk offline and you'll have to tell me about that because I love tamales of all sorts. So this is culture. Look at you. May was kite flying month. I thought it was a real season. Yes. So that's the first part. That's the culture part. And the second part of the cultural humility is humility. So do
you.
the same thing and tell me in the chat, or feel free to come off mute, what comes to mind when you think about the word humility, or if you think about somebody being humble.
Hi.
Hi.
Hi. I love making jewelry, craft, and I love to cook.
Yes. Jewelry and cooking. And is that something that you did with other family members, or how did you get to enjoy those things?
I was in a rehab place with other older people and stuff. And I just pick up on it when I got out of it. So I just continue doing it as a hobby of learning to make your own jewelry and stuff. So I just continue to do it. That's just something that I love to do. And so out of it, I just continue doing, just start selling it and stuff.
Even better when you can sell it. I love that. Thank you so much. And so I think about the culture of the place that you're talking about, and it sounds like it's part of it is being creative, and it allows for folks to be creative.
And I just love with the cooking. Me and my mom, I love to get in the kitchen cooking with my mom. I love to bake like good time recipe cakes and stuff with her and stuff. Yeah, I was born in Texas, Abilene, Texas. So that's where I was born in Texas.
Thank you so much. My brain started thinking about different food from Texas. Real quick, and feel free to raise your hand or you can do a reaction. Did anybody else cook with family members? I've heard, well, I shared about grandma, I just heard about mom. Yeah.
Yeah.
And also, did anybody not cook growing up? I don't cook now. I learned it with my grandma. We don't do it now. So that could be part of our culture too, right?
Well, it's easy to learn.
Thank you so much.
My
All
name is Tina.
Thank you, Tina, for joining.
Awesome.
Tell me, folks, now, what comes to mind when you think about humility? We talked about culture. Let's talk about humility here. What does that mean to you? Excellent. Recognizing my strengths and areas of improvement, respect other people's talents and contribution, sincere curiosity about another person's story. Perfect. Keep those coming in.
Lena, can I share a story of humility?
Please, yes,
Or
yes.
something. Speaking of food, Tina, now you have me thinking about food too. My family, my family is from like the rancho, right? No electricity, no running water, going in the summer to go bring buckets back into the house to wash dishes, etc. I remember seeing my grandma and everybody would make the nistamal, right? So like grinding the corn and then putting it in the thing, the nistamal. Anyway, I forget what it's called, but the last step where you make it really fine, I remember thinking, oh, that's no problem. Like I'm looking at them do it and it looks really easy. And I was humbled very quickly. It is hard. It's like a rock on another rock. And so when I think of humility, right, thinking about that moment as a little kid and then about our conversation today, I totally agree with the chat, right? Knowing our strengths and knowing our weaknesses. But I think humility is that really beautiful space where you realize that something might be a weakness, right? It's like that little, like, okay, this might not be my strength. I'm going to take a step back. And I think you really build an appreciation for what other people bring to the table. Yeah, that this whole conversation reminded me with the nistamal. So
Beautiful story. Grinding, I think, is what you're talking about.
yeah, it's not metate. I think it's the metate because it's a petate. The petate is the rug where you sit on, and I think it's the metate where like the rock where you where you make everything really, really fine. But yeah, it kicked my butt. Yeah.
Absolutely. Or moler, that would be the other word. And so as I'm
Yeah, to grind.
saying and I'm hearing your story, absolutely. And now there's two ways to go, because we could say, oh my gosh, that's so hard. Oh, that's ridiculous. Why do people do that? And that is not humility, right? That would be an example of what it's not. And just because we're not super sure of how to do it or familiar with it doesn't mean we can't learn. right? So I love what you're saying, that willingness to step back and appreciate what others bring, gratitude for successes. And I grew up with the word humilde in Spanish, and I'm still an English language learner. So there are times where words just don't click for me right away. So when I think humility, I always kind of went back. I remember humble was somebody who was just very poor, who would kind of give you, the shirt off their back, as they say. And that's really not what humility is. Humility really has nothing to do with weakness. It doesn't mean that just because I want to understand somebody else's point of view that I can't have my own. Instead, it's really about an attitude that we would have of modesty. Like you're saying, it comes from a place of understanding, what is my place, but also where do I fit in the whole world? Yes, doing service for others. And the most beautiful part, it entails that I don't have to know everything. I can take a breath and say, I don't have to know everything. It's okay. And I'm also open to learning. As a mom, I thought forever I had to know everything. And one day I just decided to say, I don't know. Let's go find out together. And I'm sure in your work, as whether you're working as a board member or as a staff member, you might not have all the answers. And I know people expect you to, but it's okay to say, I'm not sure, right? And that could be something we work on together. That might be something I have to get back to you. But it is about being curious and wanting to always ask, find out more, and not just stay in this place of like, oh, well, it feels dumb. I don't know. It's not what I know, so never mind, right? And we could certainly choose to be that way. They do say that ignorance is bliss. I like humility. And humility, really starts with getting to know the person. So it would be great if we were in person and we could do an activity called Who Are You? Where literally we will ask each other, who are you? Who are you? Who are you? For 2 minutes. But you can do this in many ways. You could start your board meetings, for example. I don't know if you already do, it might be great with that kind of question, something that really gets beneath the surface. So beyond what's our favorite color, really, really look for a moment of connection with each other. Now, why do I bring this up and how does it relate to the work that you have been doing and staff has been doing? I'm going to go ahead and put an image up here on the screen. And feel free to just come off mute. We're not going to have a lot of conversation about it. You can also type it in the chat if that's easier. I really want you to focus first on what do you see in this image, okay? So what do you see in this image? If you want to describe it for us, that's great, and that would be appreciated. But just stick to what do you see, okay? Here we go. What do you see? I promise you it's not a trick question. What do you see? There we go. Perfect. An artist. Does anybody see letters at the bottom? Yeah. Okay. An elephant is posing for a painting. I'm going to hold off on that perspective because that's more thinking about what it is that we're looking at and trying to rationalize it. But the artist rhino in every pic. Okay. What else do we see? What else do we see?
I see a person just like laying back.
Perfect.
I did the elephant lying back and the artist is copying the image.
Perfect. All right. We've talked about what we see. So we see that there is an elephant. The elephant is the model. We do see the rhino. And as you said, Philip, yes, the elephant is laying back. And here we have the rhino copying the image or painting. So now let's go to that second piece of what do you observe? And I'll go back now to the comments of perspectives. Perspectives, a rhino's only version they can see, and they're unable to see other way. Does anybody want to expand on that? Because now we're talking about what do we observe?
Oh, I will.
Yeah,
I wrote that. It's so you see the rhino's nose or horn in every single one of them. And it's that's their only perspective or sight. And so when you're looking at it, you're like, what is that? Well, they can't see any other way just because that is who they are. And not sure how they could, right? Because even if they took a picture of it, that is part of them. They would not be able to look around it, through it, or any other way, even a picture of it or something else. So.
Excellent. Thank you so much. So let me give you a little description here for folks. So what we're looking at is an artist studio. We do have a model that's an elephant. We do have a rhino who appears to be the artist. And what I'm hearing is that if you catch it and you can see it, this particular rhino has a horn. Do folks, can you see that? You observe that? Yeah. So the rhino has a horn, and what's happening is that every single time that the rhino is creating a work of art, you notice that this piece is in there and you've identified it as the horn because it is right on the rhino's face. So of course, like it was being said, this is the only thing the rhino knows. Now, do we think that the rhino is aware that the horn is in every picture that they draw? What do we think? Yes, no, I don't know. No, okay. Does anybody think that the rhino is aware of the horn being in those pictures or images? Hi, folks, thinking. What about the elephant? Do you think the elephant knows what the outcome will be? Or do you think that the elephant's gonna look at this image and go, oh my gosh, what did you do?
Yeah.
Yeah.
Absolutely.
I mean, it could be that the elephant was scrolling through Instagram, saw this artist and said, I got this middle piece right here that I want covered. And that's, I don't know, it could be. Well, you're absolutely right in everything that you shared. And what I want to tie this into is that our identity and our cultures, we've talked about that a little bit today. That's the who am I part. All the folks that come through the doors at San Gabriel Pomona Regional Center, who are they, right? We can find that out in a lot of ways. Sometimes we find that out through questionnaires or intake forms, but that doesn't give you the full picture, right? Now, our perspective, as folks were talking about, comes from our culture. What lens am I using has to do with, well, what's my upbringing? What's my lived experience? You know, I remember in elementary school taking a test, and one of the questions was, you're going on a skiing trip. What do you need to bring? I don't know, because I grew up in Santa Barbara, California. To my knowledge, it never snowed during the time I lived there. And I didn't have the opportunity to visit anywhere where skiing, was happening. So that's definitely not what lens I'm bringing. If they had said, you're going to the beach, what do you need to pack? That was the one I could answer. So what happens is that all of us are walking around with our own rhino horns, if you will, and we're going to call those our blind spots. Now, that's not a bad thing, right? To say we have a blind spot is not a bad thing, because look at this artist, and clearly this artist has continued to do work. Now, whether the artist knows or not that that horn is included in every image, I don't know. Again, maybe the elephant chose the rhino because of that particular feature. But nonetheless, the rhino is walking around the world with that horn. And just like the rhino is walking around with that horn, so are we. We walk around with a lot of different blind spots. Now, some of them we could become aware of. It's usually easier if somebody points it out to me, right? But sometimes, and a lot of the time, we're not aware. Just like the rhino might not be aware of that horn that's in every image. And when we don't see something, then we might be approaching situations in a way that could lead us to make mistakes, could lead us to have misunderstandings with folks. You know, I have a friend named Cavan who does work very similar to me, and we always talk about, if we look at ourselves as humans as an iceberg, folks know what an iceberg is. Can you picture one? There's a piece that is peeking over the ocean, right? about 10% of that ice, but then 90% is underneath. And I always feel like if I have a conflict with somebody, it's not because our 10% up here are clashing, it's because our 90% underneath the surface are clashing. And those are the things that I don't really know about somebody because they're so deep within the surface that I'd have to do a lot of work. I'd have to put on a scuba suit and gear and dive in there to find out. So that's what we're going to do now. We're going to put on some scuba gear. I know it's cold now, so make sure it's warm for you, because ultimately what we want to look at is our actions really inform what we do. So where we come from, where we were raised, the way that we grew up, all those different pieces of our cultures. And remember, there's so many different aspects. Whether you are talking about gender, you're talking about religion, you're talking about foods, all of those things can inform the way we act. Now, it might come in handy if you meet somebody that looks like you, or comes from the same place as you, or speaks the same language as you. But even that can be misleading if we just let our blind spots or our rhino horns lead the way, and we don't take the time to look around. Everybody with me so far? All right. So again, I want to show you the culture tree. I'll also send you a copy of this so you can look at it. And again, we usually, when we meet clients, or if somebody asks, what do you mean you're a board member for a regional center? What does that mean? You might give them just that surface piece. How do we get to the deeper and the shallow culture of what the organization is? How do you ask the right questions? Because, if I told somebody, well, if you have a disability, you can come in and they'll help you. There are some cultures where the word disability is not a favorable word, right? It's a little taboo. But what do you mean somebody's going to help me? What do they need to know about me, right? And I'm sure you have many more stories like that to share. So I want to take the last 20 minutes or so that we have and introduce you to this tool that comes from the Cultural Intelligence Center. And this is cultural values. Now, when I do this work, a lot of people tell me, okay, Lena, just give me a list. I have a lot of clients who are Korean. Can you just give me a list of how to work with Korean clients? I'd love to, but no, because one Korean person is different than another one, right? I can't write a book on how to work with people from Mexico, even though that's where I'm from, because I'm different than, my parents, and my parents are different than their neighbors, and so on. We do have commonalities, but again, remember, my family moved here 30 plus years ago. We have changed and morphed our culture. It might not be the same as somebody who's a newcomer. So to give you a little background, cultural values are really the way that people have a general orientation to life and work and relationships. So how do we approach these things? And it's not about how do I operate because I have to be this way, but if I am just comfortable and I'm at my best, how do I approach life and work and relationships? And because I have these cultural values, we could say that each one of them is a rhino horn. And because I have that horn, there are potential biases that I can have towards people who don't share my cultural value. So this hopefully will become a little more clear for folks. And what I'm going to do is I am going to send you all. Oh, sorry about that. I'm not sure what happened. Can you still see the screen? I'm like toggling between slides here. Oh, sorry about that.
I see. I don't see the toggling. I just see the what cultural values reveal.
Okay.
Now I see it. Oh,
okay. Perfect.
Yeah. Now it toggled. Yeah.
I'm not sure what I did. Okay. I think I was trying to send a. Okay. I think I'm just going to have to send it to you all. Sorry. I was trying to see how to upload a document, but okay. So the Cultural Intelligence Center, I've been doing a lot of work with this over the last couple of years. it has completely changed my perspective on how I view things and how I view people, how I view myself. I spent a lot of time just on me and thinking about, oh my gosh, that's why I do certain things. It has nothing to do with my preference or behavior. It really is about the culture that shaped me. If you are interested in some of these readings, I'd be happy to send you a list. But essentially, the Cultural Intelligence Center put together 10 of the largest cultural groupings in the world. So here are the clusters that they came up with. So you might find yourself in there. I myself am from Latin America, although I don't live in Latin America, right? I live in the US. And keep in mind again that this is fluid because people migrate from one place to another. But we start with these 10 cultural clusters. Here's a little bit deeper dive into if you want to find yourself. And so again, for me, Latin America, I am from Mexico originally, and presently I live in the United States. So now we're looking at this cluster up here. But if I were going to be 100% honestly, truly myself, I would say that my cluster is Latin America, okay? And I will send you this so that you can find yourself. And again, remember, just because you fall into one of these cluster groups doesn't mean that you have to share all the cultural values. Because what if, for example, you're adopted into a family? And so that's not your original cluster group, but you've learned these traditions. And one thing that I've noticed, and I've noticed this a lot with your clients and consumers, sometimes their culture is very different than their family's culture. Have you noticed that? They may be the same cluster, but maybe, for example, the consumer grew up here in the US. And so they don't share all the values that their families do. Or as they were growing up here, they started learning different ways, or maybe attended a different type of school than their parents or family did. And so then we end up not sharing the culture. Have you ever seen that where you're talking to a client and the family says, no, that's not how we do things? All right. So this is what I'm going to send you. And this activity is really fun. It was really fun for me to do it. And I every time that I do it, I always learn something. But essentially, there are 10 cultural values that Cultural Intelligence Center has come up with. And they're in no particular order. The way that we show them to you here is kind of like a spectrum. So I'm going to go through 3 of them tonight. I hope I have time, maybe just 2. And then I'm going to send you the information on the rest of them. And then I'll just make a plug that this would be really great for the board to do in its entirety, as well as staff. So if you'll want a proposal for this, let me know, because you're going to see how great this is. So let's start here. Now, each cultural value has kind of 2 sides of the spectrum. If we look at the first one, there's individualism and there's collectivism. Now, you could be 100% individualistic, or you could be 100% collectivistic. Maybe you're 75% collectivistic. Maybe you're like 10% individualistic, but you still relate more to this side. It doesn't mean that one is better than the other. It doesn't mean that one is right and one is wrong. You're going to see where you would land. And that's going to help you, because wherever you land, keep that in mind as though it's a horn. It's a rhino horn. And because you have this cultural value, there is a blind spot that you carry. So when it's all said and done, you would fill it out. And this is my particular chart. And I'll explain to you why I placed myself here on the closer side to collectivism. So let's run through a couple of these. And then, like I said, I will send you all these resources so that you can do the activity together, perhaps. So let's start with this concept of individualism and collectivism. Now, a person who really falls under the value of collectivism, that's a person who really has an emphasis on the group and the community or the family. They really value cooperation and harmony and social responsibility. When it comes to making decisions, it really is about the consensus. In terms of relationships, they really have a strong emphasis on group loyalty, interdependence. And if we look at a society that's collectivistic, it's prioritizing the needs of the group over the needs of the individual. If we look at individualism, and that's your cultural value, focus there is really on the individual. Individualistic folks value independence, self-reliance, self-actualization, personal achievement. When it comes to making decisions, these are really based on an individual need, not necessarily consensus. In terms of relationships, there's a strong emphasis on personal relationships and autonomy. And as a society, individualistic societies really prioritize what are the needs of the individual over the needs of the group. So how do you know which cultural value might be yours? Let me share with you, because I know, if you recall where I marked myself, I am pretty collectivistic. I would say about 75%. And for me, I think about, in terms of how I grew up in my family, you can't really make a decision on your own. And it's one of those things, we joke about it, but if you call grandma and you let her know, everybody in the family will know within 5 minutes, right? I really value making decisions that will make the whole family happy. We really emphasize family first. And there's a lot of prioritizing, well, what are the needs of everybody? Even coming down to watching a movie. Well, I know Lena really wants to see this, but is it going to be a movie that we can all watch if we have little kids with us? The way that I know I'm collectivistic, I was shopping for a car last year, and I look at all the things that people look at, mileage and perhaps, electric, things like that. But for me, one more important thing was trunk space. Not because I go shopping all the time, but because my mother-in-law uses a wheelchair. So I wanted to make sure that when we took mother-in-law along to trips, or even, take her to her appointments, our car was going to be able to fit her wheelchair. And also it couldn't be too tall. That is a collectivistic point of view. Now, does that mean that I run every decision by the family? That I say, okay, what are we having for dinner every night? No, not at all. When I make decisions, there are things that I just have to decide on my own. What doctor do I want to see, right? If I'm going to buy this outfit, doesn't mean I run everything through the family. But certainly a lot of my life is tied to that harmony and cooperation. So how does this fit in, and why does this become a rhino horn? That's not a bad thing, right? To be close with my family. But I have a friend, and we were having lunch one day, and he was telling me about his parents who are elderly, and they are at the point where they really need some support. They can't really be by themselves anymore. Now, here's where my rhino horn comes in, okay? As a collectivistic person, my first thought was, oh my gosh, they're going to come live with you, right? Your parents? And my friend says, no. Now, if I just want to look at the world through my rhino horn of collectivism, what could I think about my friend? Oh my gosh, he's a terrible person. How selfish. He doesn't care about his family. Like, what is wrong with it? We should not be friends, right? But the cultural humility part of me says, okay, hold on. That's what I would do. I mean, I know that someday my parents will live with me. I've had a room for them since I bought a house. That's my way of thinking. In my culture, in my family, we don't think about retirement homes or things like that. We think about who will they live with. So I said, well, that doesn't sound like that's my friend. So let me ask some questions. And he says, my parents, it's not that we don't want them with us, but they really value their independence. They don't want to figure out which of their kids are going to live with. They would rather that we help them create a space in their own home that would allow them to continue to be independent and autonomous. And although in my head, everything is rational and I understand it, my heart says, whew, okay, that's very different than what I am used to or what the way that I grew up. So which story do you resonate with the most? Do you feel like you are more collectivistic or individualistic? Or do you find yourself in a balance? But if you find yourself in a balance, I really, really want to encourage you. Don't say, well, it depends. It depends. At work, I'm more this. I really want you to think about who really, truly are you? If it didn't matter, if it didn't depend, who would you be? So when you are a collectivistic person, you always think about what's the impact of the group. You might say things like, let's check in with the team. For individualistic person, you might say, I'll take care of this, right? It's more of a personal accountability. If we think about consumers and clients, for example, because you are person-centered, it might seem like you're working in an individualistic capacity, but keep in mind that their family might be collectivistic. So if you've ever heard a service coordinator tell you that they brought the client in and then also 5 family members came with them, does anybody ever have that experience? Some of you? Yeah, that might mean that they're a collectivistic person and family, right? And then if you have that one client who is coming in by themselves, does that mean, oh my gosh, nobody cares about you? Nobody loves you? Not at all. That just might mean that they are really more of an individualistic person who really just values making those decisions on their own. Neither one is wrong. Neither one is right. Neither is better than the other. But it really gets you thinking, if I do have a client or a consumer that has 10 people and we're bringing in all these chairs to the office, and I am perhaps a very individualistic person, how might I need to change my approach? Because if I keep saying you, the client, what I'm saying to the family is not you, not you. And then we might have a family that doesn't really want to be on board with the program because they might think, oh, well, this center doesn't care about the family. This is not the place for us. Okay. How are we on understanding the cultural value? I know we're going through it kind of fast, but yes, you will get a copy of the 10 values of the PowerPoint. Thank you for asking. I will send you that so you can see. You see why we need the 6 hours, right? But these are really great. So let me walk through one more here because I know I'm running out of time. This is another one of my favorites, and I think it has a lot to do with your work. This one is context, either low context, direct speech, or high context or indirect speech or communication. So here again, what we have is folks who are high context. Let's say that you ask for directions. Well, I live in Oxnard, not too far from you all. And if I were to say, well, how do I get to the college? A high context person like myself would say, okay, you're going to want to start, you're going to go down the street and then, be careful if there's a super big dog on the corner and he always barks at people when you go by. So you just got to be careful. But then you're going to go down the street. Oh my gosh, guess what? A new fruit guy set up shop right there. He is the best. I've stopped there so many times. Then you're going to go like, I don't know about miles, but like, I don't know, 2, 3, 4 blocks. Does that sound like anybody you know? Versus your low context person that's just going to say, yeah, it's just 3 miles east, and then you'll be on the 101. And if you were to tell me that as a high context person, I'd say, well, what's in between? So again, thinking about folks that the regional center might work with, sometimes we just want direct answers, right? I'm going to go through this questionnaire. And I always think about my grandma when she goes to the doctor. They'll say, have you taken your metformin? The nurse just wants her to say yes. My grandma says, yeah, I started taking it like, I think 13 years ago. And I remember the day because my son took me to that appointment. Oh, he's such a hard worker. That's how I know that it was his day off because right? And when we are pressed for time, as I know sometimes regional centers are, we might come into conflict. If you're the kind of person that's just like, yes, no, give it to me straight, How do you handle maybe a coworker or a board member or a consumer that wants to tell you all these details? So again, does that mean that you'll have to sit through every story? Or if you're the opposite, right? If you're a high context person like me, and you come in and you want to share all these things, but your coordinator is just like, we got to go, we got to go, we got to go. How might I feel? I might feel disrespected. I might feel like, does this person really care about me if they don't want to listen to my story? Right? So we really have to take a look at, where do I land in these cultural values? And again, for me, this one, I am high context all the way. Like, I'm off the chart high context. But I know, for example, that in certain places, I have to be low context. And the cultural humility part is great, because if you know this about your client, think about yourself. If I'm high context and I ask, well, tell me what brought you to regional center. And somebody says, I heard about your service. My high context brain is saying, well, from where? And what were they wearing? And who did they meet? And what did they, right? But somebody who's low context is like, move on, lady, next question. So it's really important, again, that we really take a look at ourselves. Who are we and where do we land on these cultural values? And then it helps us to understand. Eventually, what we want to get to is called cultural responsiveness. And when we know these values, we know ourselves, we know how to approach people. So if you have that client consumer that talks for hours and you only have half an hour today to get through this session, you might say, okay, Lena, I know and I love your stories. Let's do this. I have to get through this questionnaire, okay? 20 questions. Can we yes, no through them, A, B, or C? And if we do that, then you can tell me everything that you want within the last 20 minutes of our meeting time. Is that okay? And that's a nice compromise, right? Because it allows that person who is dying to tell you the 500 details of how they got to no as the answer. But it helps you, if you're that low context person, get through your job. So those are some examples of a couple of these. And again, here for low context, these are folks that say, can you be more specific? Just give me the details, the gist, if you will. High context people say, let me think about that, or they're really looking more at that, the tone or the silence, or sometimes it's about things that are not even said, right? So there's quite a few of these. The last one that I'll share with you is power distance. And power distance really has to do not with how much power we have, but rather how do we approach. So for example, high power people put a lot of difference in status, and superiors make decisions, more of a hierarchy. People who are low power distance have more of a view of equality and shared decision making, etc. So I want to share this story with you before I run out of time. And a couple years ago, I did some focus groups for you all, particularly with a lovely, lovely, lovely group of Korean folks who invited me to their church. And when I asked them questions about the regional center, I heard a lot of great things. Oh, my service coordinator is helpful, and of course there were things that they said, like there's not enough service coordinators, or I wish they would call me back right away. But one thing that really stuck with me has to do with power distance. Now, as a regional center, we might be low power distance. If we're a service coordinator or we're a family member, we might say, you know what, we have to advocate for ourselves and we have to advocate for our client or our child, etc. But think about the cultures who are more high power distance. And so when I interviewed these folks, one woman said to me, listen, Lena, I'm Korean, and in my culture, we do not question authority. We do not ask, for more. Can you imagine if I stood up and in a meeting and shouted like, I demand more services? What would my culture say about me? What would my church say about me? Now, that's not every Korean person, right? You might have met some folks who do advocate and don't mind asking for more services. But in this case, what this person was saying was, it puts me in a really uncomfortable position when somebody just says, well, advocate for yourself. Doesn't mean I don't want to. It just means that it's in conflict with who I am, who I grew up being, and how I live now. So the question then is, how do we work with folks who do have different cultural values than us and work through those cultural differences and say, okay, I understand. I come from a place where oh, my grandma told me I have rights and I would fight for them and I needed to use my voice and speak up. But I hear you saying that that can be conflicting for you because of your cultural background and values. So how do we work together? Because I can't request things for you, right? I can't make decisions for you, but how do we do this in a way that feels comfortable? So that essentially is what we're talking about in terms of cultural values. And as I mentioned, there are 10 of them. It is a 6-hour workshop, and I really wish I had the time to share all of these with you, but I will send you the PowerPoint so you can see the rest of them. I kind of picked the 3 that were a little bit closer in terms of the work that you might do. And the question then becomes, well, so what? What are we going to do about this? Right? What does this mean for us and the work that we do? Well, like all work, it is ongoing. It is something that, we have to reflect on. So again, the first thing is really diving into our own cultures, who we are, what are our beliefs, what are those horns? And remember, they're not a bad thing to have them. And then when you approach service and programs, when you talk about the organization, think about, as a board member, what questions could I ask people to better understand how they or their family and their cultural backgrounds might shape their own understanding of a disability? Their beliefs for support, because you might come to them and say, there's so many ways that we can help you. And to them, the cultural value of oh, no, we don't share our dirty laundry, if you will, right? We don't share our family business outside of the family. So then how do we change the way that we approach or that we share or we ask questions? What might be, who's in their expanded support group? How would we ask that of somebody that's individualistic? What if we say it's really important that you have a great support system, and this individualistic person says, I don't share stuff with my family, right? It's just me. It's just me. So that was one whole hour and really fast, but I just want to say that I hope we get to talk about this more. Like I said, this is typically a 6-hour workshop, but I really thought it would be valuable for you to get an introduction. Oftentimes, we feel like this work is about just, having rules or guidelines or worksheets, but really it's a lot about self-reflection. And cultural humility tells us that it's okay if we don't have the answers. It's okay if we don't know, as long as we're willing to do some work. And that starts with us. So now that you have found out that you are a low context person and you know why your office mate annoys you because they talk all the time, or vice versa, I have friends who just give me one word. How was your day? Good. What does that mean, right? So you can think about that in terms of the way that you do your work with the board, the way that you talk about the organization. How do you support the staff of the center and so forth? So thank you so much once again for having me. I promise I will send you all of these materials, and you have my contact information if you have any questions on them. Again, happy to recommend some readings. But I hope this was another helpful tool for you all. Once again, thank you for having me back. And back to you, Jesse.
Thank you. I'll give it back to Trish here, but I just want to say thank you, Lena. As always, your style is very engaging, and you take these really complex topics that have a lot of layers and dimension, and you just make it very friendly and gentle to approach. And so I think I don't want to speak for all of us, but peeling the onion back to make us think about these things that, as we're working and doing a million things every day, how do we slow down and remember all of the nuances to the work that we're doing? So always appreciate having you here. Just want to say thank you on behalf of our staff and our board.
Thank you, Jesse. Yes, that was great. Thank you, Lena. It was really interesting just, hearing you talk about some of these things, and made myself some little notes. And one of the things that's like, what questions can I ask to better understand? And so I love that. So thank you so much. We know that was a quick one. Maybe we'll try and have you come back again. So I think that would be really interesting. So, but thank you so much. We are going to move along now because we do have a full agenda tonight. And so I'm going to move on to Julie with Yes, Julie, it's your turn. You're up.
Yes, thank you. I am. Okay, let me just change one thing here. Okay. So our Strategic Development Advisory Committee met earlier this evening. Actually, it started in the afternoon. And we have two quick action items for the board tonight. The first is every year we send out, you should have received, and hopefully you all completed the board training survey. And based on the results the committee looked at, we have two recommendations for training topics for the calendar year 2026. As a reminder, the Department of Developmental Services has a slew of training topics that are mandated for us, but we do have two open time slots throughout the year. And we have always sent out a survey to board and committee members to rank their top topics. And let's see, can I share my screen? And I just want to, so everyone can see the topics that we are recommending for approval tonight. Thank you very much. All right. So based on the survey responses that came in, these are the two top vote getters, if you will. The first is understanding the full range of services available through the regional center. And our committee is recommending that this be not January, but in February of 2026. And the second highest vote getter was understanding the role of the Department of Developmental Services, DDS, as we know and love it, plus the Association of Regional Center Agencies, ARCA, and California's Regional Center System. This came back up as a very complex but necessary topic to really start to unwind. And our committee, based on the results, is recommending this for the April 2026 board meeting / training. So knowing that these are the two top vote getters, I'm asking for a motion to approve these two training topics for submission to DDS. We submit a report every year in December. Adriana, I see your hand. Thank you so much.
Second. I motion.
Thank you. Thank you for the second. Erica, I'm going to leave that up to you to determine who that is.
I motion too.
Thank you. I think that's Tina.
Yeah.
Thank you, Tina. All right. Do we have any questions or concerns with regards to these two topics? All right. Not hearing or seeing any. All in favor? Please say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? Thank you. Thank you. We do have one more action item for this evening. I said we were very busy. We are recommending Mr. David Sarmiento. I'm hoping that I'm saying his name correctly. He told us to call him David, so that's what we're doing. We interviewed him tonight, and we, as a committee, are recommending him for membership of the Advisory Committee for Individuals Served and their families. We unanimously agree and believe that he will be a valuable asset and provide a key point of view on that committee. So I'm going to ask for a motion to accept Mr. Sarmiento.
I'll make the motion.
committee. Thank you, Bill. Do I have Kelly, I saw your hand. Thank you for seconding that. Any questions or concerns with regard to this nomination? All right, all in favor, please say aye or raise your hand. Any opposed? Any abstentions? I am 2 for 2. Thank you so much, everybody. And it's been our pleasure on the Strategic Development Committee to interview such wonderful people. So thank you for accepting our recommendations.
Thank you, Julie. I appreciate that. Moving on to other board and community announcements. So the following committees will not be meeting in November: Community Relations Legislative Advisory Committee and the Advisory Committee for Individuals Served and Their Families, and Strategic Development Advisory Committee. As we get into the holidays, you know that the next few months our schedule sort of changes. But there will be a board training and no business items will be discussed on November 12th. So on November 12th, 6 p.m., it will not be open to the public. It will be a specific board training. And I look forward to seeing all of you there. And I believe Adriana had some information and an event she wanted to share with us this evening. So Adriana?
Yes, hi everyone. Nice to see everyone. And I know Lena is gone, but that was wonderful. I just wanted to share this event. Hopefully my camera cooperates. Here we go. It's an event I attended. This was actually last week. Pomona Connects put together this event, Pomona's Conference of Collaboratives. I had a chance to be amongst a lot of the people that I used to do a lot of work here in the city with, folks from sorts of different agencies, of course, the school district and the city. Anyhow, there were different topics that each table discussed about how to help the city, and resources for folks with disabilities was a common theme. And I think it's so fitting that we're picking our training schedule or training topics for the next months, because there was a lot of interest from the city and the school district to learn more about the resources that the regional center has to offer. And I was really curious. I know as a parent, I always wondered, oh, gosh, like I wonder how our service coordinators get trained. Like, how do you possibly give someone every tool, every resource, everything? It has got me really curious. And it looks like a lot of folks that are tasked with connecting families to resources don't have the answers either. And I was curious. I wanted to bring this up to the board and to everyone, because I think there's a real need and a desire to do some collaborating and to figure out, like, hey, how can we help folks in special ed for PUSD feel better prepared or better trained about the resources available to them? I, as a board member, would love to know more about like the services that we offer. So I wanted just to share that, there seems like there's big conversations happening, at least here in the city of Pomona. I'm not familiar with other communities, but there seems to be just a real synergy now. And I was curious who would be the best person to direct that to. Would that be a Tim? Would that be Sal? Jesse? I wasn't sure where to go, but I know we're the right people for it.
For open, I saw Lucy come up. We can connect with you, Adriana. I think it's timely, and I'm also thinking of the segue on the topics that were coming up for the range of services. I think we can kind of expand on
Yeah.
this. So really happy to get connected with you so we can get that information forward. So I'll connect with you, and then we'll get you to the right people.
Thank you, Jesse. Thank you.
Thank you for that, Adriana. I appreciate
Yeah,
it.
and thank you, Trish. Thank you.
Thank you for sharing that. It's so important that we as community, as board members, that we also, one of the things that we've talked about is making sure that we're sharing what we know. Might be just a little piece of the puzzle, but whatever we can share to help get the information out, I think is so critical and so important. And so thank you for that. I appreciate that. So Jesse, and then maybe one of the things, just real quick, like one of the things I asked Jesse to do to work on is a little cheat sheet for some of us on the board, which we're working on, just to kind of help so that if you're somewhere, you have a little cheat sheet to say, oh, okay, you can call this person if you need this help, 0 through 3, or Latterman, or wherever they fall at in the scope. it's a little something for us to have on our fridge, or, you know, take a picture of it in our phones, and, you know, we're able to make those connections. Because sometimes I know for myself personally is that we could be out somewhere and you hear a conversation or you see something and you want to give them the information, and it's like, oh, okay, I don't want to give them Jesse's phone number. I don't want everybody calling Jesse. So that is something that we are working on. And so this is all kind of timely all together. So thank you, Adrienne. I really appreciate that. So with that, is there any other business that we need to take care of, or any other comments before we adjourn? We do have an executive session this evening for all board members. So Erica did send out, believe a separate link for that particular meeting. And so if there are no further questions or comments, then we will adjourn this meeting at 8:39. And board members, I will see you on the other link.
Thanks, everybody.
Thank you, everybody. Good night.
Hey, everybody.